Okay, so welcome to this week's Facebook Live. As usual, it's bath time in the house, and we had our third child last week, which is beautiful and wonderful, but it also means there's more potential for background screaming and noise. So hopefully we won't be too disturbed. So this week I wanted to do something around something that came up in the questions and comments around the video a couple of weeks ago. And there was some discussion around recovery, around what do Optimum Health Clinic claim, or what do we think about recovery. And the comments kind of went on for a while, and I jumped in, and then I thought, well, let's do a video around it. I think it's a controversial area. It's something that I personally feel there's a huge amount of misunderstanding and misinformation that goes around, and I think it's helpful to do something to try and clarify some of that. So I'll talk for a little bit, and then if people who are watching live want to post comments underneath, questions underneath, then I'll try and jump in to answer some of those directly on this Facebook Live. And I'll also try and come into the comment section over the coming few days as well. So I think the first thing to say is when I first started talking about my own recovery from ME chronic fatigue, when my first book was published, getting on for, believe it or not, 14 years ago now. It's a long time. Two of the comments often came out were, one, had I ever really been ill? And people read my book, I think they realised that I certainly had been ill. But the second question was, well, if I'd really been ill, then surely I wasn't fully recovered. And I always felt that said a lot more around cultural beliefs and understandings around ME chronic fatigue than it did about my own personal situation. And back in those days, it was pretty controversial talking about the idea of recovery. But I think it was also received with a certain amount more positivity than it can be in certain circles now, partly because there are so many of these apparently miracle recovery stories which are out there, where certain approaches or interventions claim that people are making, 95% of people are making full recoveries, for example. And I think understandably, and actually I think appropriately, people get strong in their opinions about that. And one of the things that I would say is anyone that claims that they have an approach where 95% of people are recovering and making full recoveries, where they're curing ME chronic fatigue, or they say directly or even intimate towards the fact that they believe that they have the answers or all the answers, and when people don't recover, it's down to their own fault of how they're using that. I think that alone is a warning sign that someone hasn't got a complete picture. And it's often a warning sign that that's something to probably stay away from. ME chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia are hugely complex illnesses. And not only does the Optimum Health Clinic not have all the answers, I don't believe anyone has all the answers. Having said that, I think we have some answers, and I think we've helped some people a huge amount, some people quite a lot, some people a little bit, and some people will probably say we haven't helped them very much. And I think that would be an honest assessment in terms of the work that we do and where we are at this point in time. I and others at Optimum Health Clinic have always tried to be very measured in terms of how we respond to, how we put things out and how we respond to things. I think partly because we recognise that with ME chronic fatigue fibromyalgia, we're talking about a collection of illnesses. We're not talking about a single virus or a single disease that everyone's got, that we can therefore say this is the disease and this is the answer to it. What we're talking about is a collection of illnesses which needs some recognition and definition of stages of recovery, of subtypes, of separating out things which are primarily based around in the adrenals, things based in the mitochondria, things which are Lyme disease or co-infection based, things which are related to trauma. And until we separate out this kind of complexity, you can't make any kind of sweeping statements around this as a group of illnesses. Because if you're saying, well, this is the answer, well, it may be part of the answer, or it may be an answer, for a particular subgroup. But it certainly isn't the answer for all of those groups that are put together. I think this is one of the reasons why traditional medicine has been so stuck with ME chronic fatigue fibromyalgia, because it doesn't respond in the way that traditional illnesses are expected to, i.e. you find a single cause and therefore you treat that cause and then you have predictable results in terms of how people respond to that. Interestingly, though, if you take other chronic illnesses, you separate out from acute illnesses or physiological injuries, like someone breaks a leg. If someone breaks a leg in the same place in the same way, it's likely you're going to get predictable results in terms of treatment around it, unless you have variable factors which change that. But if you take other chronic illnesses, you take something like cancer, modern medicine certainly doesn't have all the answers. In fact, I think it's true to say we've come a long way in the last decade. I imagine with developments in medicine and technology, we're going to come a lot further in the next decade. And I think that is absolutely true in terms of even world-leading clinics and professionals around ME chronic fatigue fibromyalgia. I look back on things that we were doing a decade ago, and part of me feels somewhat like, oh my God, I can't believe that that's how we saw it, that's how we understood it. And I would absolutely expect the same thing to happen in the next decade. So to sit here and for someone to say, well, we have all the answers, or we are curing people, or everyone we treat is recovering, it's just not the case. Having said that, I think it's also true to say that it's not, we can get very caught on the idea of full recovery, and understandably so. And certainly I've experienced and seen many people go on to what they would call a full recovery. And I think for a lot of people, especially when someone's been ill for many, many years, I think they would take progress. They would take improvement. And it's like, yes, they would love a full recovery, but if they could have, I wouldn't give anyone, but if they can have a guarantee they were going to make 20% progress from where they are, that would still have value. Like, that would still be of significance. And certainly our experience is that there are very few people where any one thing anyway takes them the whole way. In fact, one of the things that's been fascinating for us is trying to understand which interventions are appropriate for which people at different stages of recovery. Something that I've said in a number of different places before is the breakthrough at one stage can become the limitation at the next stage. So, for example, if someone is in stage 2 and what they've learned to do is very carefully pace all of their activity, and that's something that's really supported them in making progress and moving forwards, suddenly that pacing can become the new limitation. The pacing can become the thing which is now causing them to constantly check their symptoms all the time, and that can become a source of anxiety, which can trigger the nervous system, which can sometimes be a cause of actually draining the system. Having said that, the pacing before was the thing that broke the boom and bust cycle. So do I believe that a percentage of people can make full recoveries? Absolutely. Have I seen that? Absolutely. Maybe we'll talk a minute about what I mean by full recovery. Do I believe that we have all the answers? Absolutely not. Do I believe that when someone comes to the clinic, we can immediately know what's going to happen? Absolutely not. One of the things that is frustrating and something that we learn from is sometimes someone will come and it will appear to be a simple case. And our expectation will be it's going to be relatively simple. Someone will do something like the 90-day program, or they will do some work on nutrition, or both, or whatever. And our expectation is that we would see significant progress quickly, and it doesn't happen. And there are other people that will come and it will look complicated, and there will be a surprise, and something that we weren't expecting to have much impact will have significant impact. One of the questions is what's changed in the last 10 years? I think one of the things that's changed in the last 10 years is our ability to understand and predict what's going to be effective and what's going to help people. I think another thing that's changed significantly in the last 10 years is understanding around mitochondrial function. I remember 10 years ago, 2006, we started doing our first mitochondrial testing. And what you're seeing in the last 12 to 18 months is the academic research world starting to realize how significant that work is. You know, some of the deeper understanding in terms of functional medicine testing is also significantly changing and progressing and move forwards. You know, and there are many, many other pieces in terms of that jigsaw, and we need more money for research and ultimately money to support treatment as well. I think I should also say something about what we mean by full recovery. One of the things that I think is fascinating in the later stages of recovery is how do you define the point that someone is fully recovered? One of the things that is confusing is that healthy people get tired. And when you've been experiencing ME chronic fatigue tiredness for many years, it's hard to have a normal reference point. And I remember the first year after I felt I was recovered, and I would be exhausted from, you know, working or exercising or whatever. And what I subsequently learned to remember was normal tiredness. And I would have a concern that that was something that was abnormal. And then you realize that everyone gets tired, but there's a difference between the tiredness we experience in ME chronic fatigue and the tiredness that a healthy normal person experiences that passes with sleep and normal rest. I think another confusion is when you've been somebody who's been used to an achiever lifestyle, and often when you look at the story that how someone had lived before they first got sick, and you realize it was absolutely out of balance, someone's reference point for the fact they've made a full recovery is they can go back and live the life that caused them to get sick in the first place. Which when you think about it, of course, is absolutely ridiculous. It's like, that's the life that caused them to get sick, and that's now their reference point for trying to be healthy and be well. And I would define full recovery as being able to have the energy to live a normal life in a way where you're not concerned about how much you do, how much activity you do, getting ill, having symptoms. That means being able to work full time, have a family life, have a kind of be able to exercise in sensible ways. It doesn't mean training for a marathon, having young children, working 60 hours a week and trying to have hobbies and a social life. That isn't necessarily healthy or normal. Much of what you see in our society is actually unsustainable in terms of the way that people live. And so there's something which is important to understand in terms of what is full recovery. Is it possible for everyone? I don't think it is necessarily possible for everyone. And maybe this is a controversial thing to say, but I absolutely think there are people where we simply do not understand everything that's happening in their case. I think the number of the people that are like that is significantly reduced over the years, but we don't know everything and we're learning. And as frustrating as it might be for the patient, and this is sound like an odd thing to say, but for us as a practitioner, the patients that are the most complicated are the ones that actually we learn the most from. In fact, many of the innovations in the Optimum Health Clinic over the years have been through patients which didn't respond in the way that they obviously wanted to and we would have wanted them to, but we've absolutely learned and understood through the process of doing that. So if you're watching this and you're still in your own experience of ME chronic fatigue, I really get that you want to have a certainty that it's possible to make a full recovery. And it's obviously tempting when people make that promise. And equally, if you're someone that's been ill for a long time, you've tried a lot of things that haven't worked, anybody that's talking about recovery at all, that some people can recover or improvements possible, can also be really difficult, can be difficult to hear, because that hasn't been your experience. And if it hasn't been your experience, it's hard to believe it can be other people's experience. And also when there are a lot of people out there, which it certainly can appear that they're more interested in earning money as a practitioner than they are being truthful and being in integrity about the reality of recovery in people's experiences. That also causes a lot of frustration for people. And I think that's also a reasonable response. we've always tried to be measured. We've tried to be responsible. We've tried to be honest about our effectiveness in terms of what we do. And that brings me to another question that we get asked a lot, which is why don't we publish success rates? This is another one of those what we kind of call wicked problems. What I mean by that is a problem that there isn't a satisfying answer to it. I don't believe we should publish success rates until those success rates are backed up with robust clinical research, i.e. until we've published the randomized controlled trial that we're currently working on. And maybe I'll do a Facebook Live in the coming weeks about where we are with that project. We did a prospective preliminary study published in the British Medical Journal Open back in 2012, and that's open access, and you can freely read that publication in terms of the results and the limitations about that particular project. So I'm personally highly cynical and skeptical about anybody that is making claims that are not backed up in terms of research. But then on the other side is people will say, well, if you don't publish them, maybe you're hiding something. And it's, as I say, it's a wicked problem. I don't think we should come out and make claims if they're not backed up, but then the difficulty is people want to have information about the work that we do. That's why we put out recovery stories in the way that we do. And the recovery stories that we do, we did one last week, we do one once a month now on the Facebook Live. We did about 35 in the original Secrets to Recovery. Most of those stories are 30, 40, 45 minutes long, and they are deliberately not kind of overnight miracle stories. In fact, we deliberately pick people that have complex journeys because we think that's more representative of the majority of people that we work with. So we do our best to be responsible when talking about recovery. We recognize we don't have all the answers. We do recognize we have answers that seem to help a lot of people, and we're incredibly proud of that. We're proud of the fact that a significant percentage of people over the years that have come to Optimal Health Clinic have always come through word of mouth, through people that we've worked with before. If people want to find out more about what we do, we also have a very comprehensive amount of information on the internet. We have a free information pack. We offer free 15-minute chats. And ultimately, in terms of making a decision about treatment at the clinic, we give as much information and opportunity to answer questions as we can, completely free of charge. And then ultimately, you have to make a decision. And we don't make you promises. We don't make you claims. We try to give as much information as we can. And we make no guarantee. Well, we make a guarantee. The guarantee we make is we will do the best we can with the resources and tools we have to help you with the understanding we have at this point. And we'll certainly make that guarantee. But I think anything more than that, I don't think you would believe us, and I wouldn't feel that we had integrity making guarantees beyond that. I recognize that's not an ideal scenario. I recognize you would like it to be different. We would like it to be different. That's also why the Optimal Health Clinic is 100% owned by a charity, and 100% of any profit that's made, although we don't run the organisation with profit as a primary motive, but 100% of profit goes towards research with the long-term vision that we will be able to get government funding for treatment here in the UK and hopefully health insurance funding in other countries. So that was a bit of a longer rant, most than I anticipated it being, but hopefully that covers some of the territory. I'll go through some of the questions here in a second, so if you do want to ask a question, feel free to post it now. And I'm just looking back at the notes I put together, but I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to cover. So let me go through the questions that are on here. Do you still crash? No, I don't still crash. Do I get tired? Yes. Was I extremely tired when I woke up this morning? Yes. Having had a newborn baby and also 2 children with a sickness bug over the weekend, it was quite intense. And I suppose another way of putting it, do I think I'm Superman? No. One of the lines that's come back to haunt me in the Freedom from ME DVD is I made some boast about working 80 hours a week. And I think that was a reflection of my gung-ho-ness, let's say, on the early years of having recovered. And perhaps I'll just put the record straight that I like to think I've become a little bit more mature and measured in my attitude to kind of sustainable living since then. But am I fully recovered? Yes, by my definition of that. If someone doesn't believe that, then I don't know. come to the gym or something. Let's go and let's test it. I don't know. But yeah, but as I say, and do I know lots of practitioners at the clinic and lots of other people that would consider themselves the same? Yes. Do I know many people which are not their situation is still not resolved and still complicated? Yes, I do as well. And I think that's also important to say. But I believe we're doing a bloody good job at helping a lot of people. I think I touched on that, what treatments changed in the last decades. Someone's saying if it's a serious problem for the brain and internal organs that cannot be repaired, then the problem exists. Yep, that's true. If there's lasting physiological damage, then that can be a factor. I think sometimes things can get put down to physiological things because there's a lack of other explanation of what's happening. And sometimes you can find that things can be improved. But as I say, I think the focus should be around quality of life and improvement, not around an obsession of it's 100% recovery or nothing. Because if someone makes significant improvement, that has significant value for them in terms of their life. Susanna just signed up for TTP, looking forward to getting started. That's great. Is CFS always caused by being overworked? Absolutely not. There are people who live a reasonably sensible, balanced life. They haven't got an achiever helper pattern, and they get bitten by a tick and develop Lyme's disease, and I would categorise that separately from ME chronic fatigue. Or people that have been affected by organophosphate poisoning. There's lots and lots of different things that can cause ME chronic fatigue that are not to do with overachieving. And I would say there's a place for psychology, not necessarily in what always cause someone to get sick, but when you suffer from an illness where no one can tell you what's wrong with you, why it's wrong with you, will you recover, that has a significant impact on someone's psychology and nervous system. And sometimes the question is not what caused someone to get ill, but what's impacting on their capacity to recover. And it isn't necessarily the only factor, but addressing as many factors as necessary is what we need to do. And so sometimes there's an absolute physiological cause, and psychology can absolutely be critical in terms of the recovery process still. Sheila, thank you for being so frank. We are a work in progress. We sure are. That's true of, I think, all of us. And it's certainly true of the Optimum Health Clinic. A lot of recovery stories seem to be from people who have gone on to do the psychology course. What's the likelihood of recovery without doing the course? That's a really good question. And it's something that I've thought about a few times. And I have a somewhat selfish answer to that, which is it's easier for me to find those recovery stories because I'm involved in the training course, and it's just easier to be in touch with people. Often what happens is people recover and go on and live their life, and we might never hear from them again, or if we do, we're not necessarily in a kind of ongoing contact. So people that do the training course, often they've recovered or they're recovering, they do the course, and we have a more long-standing relationship. So when we're thinking of recovery stories, we're more likely to ask those people. So anyone that's watching this that's a recovered patient or had a positive experience that feels they'd like to do a recovery story, let us know. Obviously, the chance they won't be watching the video because they haven't any reason to. But yeah, that's really the story behind that. So the training course, yes, that massively has helped a lot of people, and we've certainly had some amazing stories with that. But I think the reason why you see more of those recovery stories is simply just the access to the people. How do you test mitochondrial function? That's quite a big topic. There's actually some really good stuff on our YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/freedomfromme and look for mitochondrial function, there was a video recorded 6 or 7 years ago with myself and Tanya Page, who was a former director of nutrition at the clinic, where we were using table tennis bats and balls to illustrate it, which it's not particularly professionally produced, the video, but a lot of people said it was really helpful in terms of understanding it. So I'd recommend that. Just reading through. What about fibromyalgia? Fibromyalgia it's a complex one in some ways. This is going to be an unsatisfying answer, I think, and maybe it's something we'll do a further video on. But a way to classify fibromyalgia is that it has a lot of the same origins of ME chronic fatigue, but it has the additional element of pain. And that sometimes means that the pain needs specific treatment and targeting to address it independently. And sometimes it's part of the wider picture in terms of what's happening. So it's not that satisfying in some ways, I think, in terms of definition, but often we lump them together when we're doing these more kind of broad kind of marketing communications like our information pack or something like this where we're just doing a general thing. But I'd certainly be open to doing some specific videos and content around fibromyalgia. I think that'd probably be worth doing at some point. Karen, I've made massive improvement, but still find myself topping over the edge, not crash, just symptoms coming back. Is that something I just have to get used to? Not necessarily. So there are some people where they get to 90-95% and they get their life back and they get quality of life. And then there are, under significant pressure, their body still displays some symptoms. And sometimes those symptoms are a helpful warning sign. Sometimes those symptoms are actually genuinely normal tiredness and it's like they're just labeling it the wrong way. And sometimes there's some physical resilience that needs more time to recover. Like I thought I was recovered and then several years later I realized I had much more resilience that I didn't have. And sometimes there are more things to physically address. As I said earlier, sometimes the breakthrough at one stage isn't always the limitation, but we get overemphasized on the things that have helped us and forget there may be other things that need to be considered as well. I did the course at OHC a few years ago and have not recovered. I'd like to come back to the clinic. What course of action would you recommend? If you've been in contact with a practitioner, I'd contact them. We do 15-minute reviews, which is like a 15-minute chat for someone that's not been in treatment for a period of time to just, it's a free way of checking, assessing how we might help things move forwards. If you're not still in touch with a practitioner or you'd like to work with someone different, I would email inquiries@theoptimumhealthclinic.com and someone will respond to you. Lots of questions, it's good. I'm going to finish in a minute or two, but let me just see. My cognitive function and in particular memory are always very poor. Any advice? There are often reasons why that would be the case. It can just be physiologically, overall the system is weak and it's therefore spilling out into affecting cognitive function as well. Other times there are specific physiological explanations for that. It can be digestive based, causing brain fog. It can also be other factors in terms of viral factors and things impacting. There's a whole bunch of reasons, and I don't claim to be the most eloquent in terms of the physiological side. I oversee the whole clinic and I'm specialist on the psychology side, which by the way is one of the reasons why a lot of the content I produce is more psychology leaning, because that's more of my expertise. And I'm certainly always encouraging the nutrition team to come forwards and contribute as well. Sleep's my biggest problem. I'm up to 5 miles a day walking now and the cognitive functions have improved greatly, but sleep is ridiculous. Bed by 10 p.m, wake at 1 p.m, wide awake, get up at 9. What should we do for sleep? It's a bit of a big one. Maybe we'll do a video on sleep. If others would like that, then I'm definitely open to doing that. Sometimes sleep involves much more complex investigation physiologically and psychologically, but I think if we did a video on that, I could probably make some useful suggestions. So yeah, maybe like that comment or let me know we can look at that. Last couple, would you recommend raw or vegan diets? I wouldn't recommend any one diet. I would say that it's all about everyone being physiologically different. An issue with raw and vegan can be lack of protein and impact on blood sugar. I'm personally someone that absolutely has always needed significant amounts of protein. I spent 3 years vegetarian when I was ill, thinking it was helping me. The day I started eating meat was a major turning point in my own health and energy. And I know other people where the day they went raw, not sorry 100% raw, but started introducing a lot more raw food, was a turning point for them. So it's all about biochemical individuality, and that's where listening to your body and getting the right practitioner advice is significant. All right, I was going to do 10 minutes, we're 30 minutes in, so maybe we'll leave it there. But I really appreciate all the comments, guys. It's much more satisfying doing it with the interaction than it is just doing a kind of a vomit of information at the screen. That's just last one. Susanna's asking, Do some people recover within the 90 days? I hope to. I'm sure everyone that comes in hopes to, and we would hope that. Yes, there are people that claim that the 90-day program within the 90 days has been a massive factor in them getting to a point of recovery. I'm always a little bit suspicious of anyone claiming recovery in 90 days. I think even if it's building resilience or it's building in factors to prevent relapse, I think that can take more time of integration. But we've seen significant progress in 90 days. And for other people, the 90-day program is a kickstart, and it takes a much longer period of time with their own focus and often some support ongoingly beyond that as well. So thank you, everyone. I will aim to do the same thing, same time, same place next week. And yeah, I hope that's been useful.